Return of the Generation X in 2006. Look, that moment right there got an enormous pop. I'm not in denial when you watch that back, seeing Shawn Michaels and Triple H together again as baby faces for the first time, well, ever really as good guys, but especially since they teased it a few years earlier and then just didn't bother doing it. I understand why they would have chased the high of the moment at very least, but it was just everything. And by everything I mean, pretty much the last 20 years that followed since. Every DX reunion, every segment has got diminished returns, apart from the goated Roy's Triple X one with Imperium, where the game Triple H cooked and booked and finally made it right. Every DX reunion, I should say, under Vince McMahon was absolutely horrible. We of course only recently learned what the it in was, but at the time they were obsessed with Vince McMahon being like a giant chicken. It's a cack. It was green slime all the time. It was poo from the ceiling. It was nothing that made DX quite incredible when it was these two in 1997, and at least incredibly over and like kind of finger on the pulse, zeitgeist type acts of the Attitude Era with Triple H. Yeah, South Park, kicking ass, Kenny's getting killed, and the New Age Outlaws are killing the LOD. It was none of that. It was just dickheads in army helmets and tanks as, you know, like sort of allegories for Cax, and the Spirit Squad and Cody Rhodes and Randy Orton and Mr. Kennedy and absolutely everybody getting buried around them. It was glow sticks, merchandise, all that sort of stuff. It was nothing of what DX actually stood for, and yet they had the gall every now and then to book them as if it was like, we were kind of the first and the last guys to win the Monday Night War because there was nobody else around to fight their corner for them. Brothers of Destruction DX was maybe the greatest karmic reward in wrestling history for the haters.
And the Hitman.
And indeed, the Hitman. I think wrestling would have been fine without any of these two doing any of this post 2006.
It's difficult to pick a moment for this because if you pick a moment, you obviously have to think about the sort of butterfly effects that go with it. So I tried to focus in on one specific match or specific moment that just no one can really disagree with, and I think I've nailed it with Brock Lesnar beating Kofi in 6-7 seconds basically on the premiere episode of SmackDown, because they just didn't need to do it. Like, I'm not saying that Kofi Kingston, had this not have happened, would have gone on to have a year-long run with the WWE Championship. He wasn't having great matches, if we're perfectly honest, as WWE Champion, but we were all lucky enough to be there when he won the title at WrestleMania 35, and it was just such a lovely moment, and this was the complete opposite of that. I'm not even necessarily saying that you can't have Brock Lesnar beat Kofi Kingston to become WWE Champion. It's just the way they did it. I distinctly remember when it happened, because it was obviously packaged in also with the Cain Velasquez reveal, and that sort of distracted people from it for a split second of like, oh, that's cool, they're gonna get Brock and Kane, and I mean, at the end of the day, look how that turned out. But you sort of realised in the immediate aftermath of that, oh, they still could have done Brock beats Kofi as WWE Champion and goes on to defend that against Cain Velasquez without beating him in 6 seconds. It just solidified for everyone. Right, that was a nice moment for you all. I know you all wanted Kofi to have this amazing moment at WrestleMania, but we're back to our guys now, and that guy is never going to be seen on the top of the card ever again. And it's just horrible, especially for someone like Kofi. Like, if it was someone who was a bit of a divisive figure within WWE, you maybe could excuse it because you could think, well, they've probably rubbed someone the wrong way backstage and they've gone, yeah, let's do it. It just felt, it's such a Vince thing, this of, I didn't want this guy to win it. He was a replacement anyway, and despite how well it's been received, let's get back to why I want to be champion as fast as possible. And in 7 seconds they did it, and it was just terrible, wasn't it?
Mean-spirited.
Yeah, what a git.
So you want to know what wrestling moment I would delete from history forever? Well, for me, so the wrestling moment that I would delete from history forever, it's a big moment. It's like a full-on era. It's the Thunderdome era, because, well, I probably don't even have to really explain it, do I? Because I think as soon as I've said those two words, like Thunderdome era, your mind's already gone to, ugh. Because that was just the vibe, wasn't it? I mean, it wasn't the wrestlers' fault at all. It was the world's fault. It was because of all the horribleness that was going down in the world. And if we just got this product, which was obviously trying to make the best of a bad situation. We couldn't have people in these arenas anymore. Well, in this arena, like Performance Center and the Thunderdome thing, like we couldn't have them there anymore. So we just had this weird, soulless vessel thing with LED screens and cheers.wav. And it was it was okay. It was just, that was just the energy throughout all of it. It was anytime something good actually happened, an escape from the just crazy situation that was going on outside your door, it was always just tinged with this thing of like, it would have been so much better if there was just people cheering this moment of like Drew winning the WWE Championship and like Bianca Belair winning the Royal Rumble, Edge having his first match back, his like first singles match back after his retirement. Like all these awesome moments just would have been that much better if there was a big old live cheer when they happened. But it wasn't. Like we either had just pure silence or that weird noise that really just haunts you in your nightmares. And yeah, for me, it's just one that I don't feel like it's an era where a lot of people are ever going to go back and revisit it and be like, yeah, I want to go and watch that Drew McIntyre against Sheamus really physical match that went down. I think it was at Fastlane that one year. Like, it's not, even though the match itself was pretty good from what I remember, it's not something you want to go back and revisit just because of the overall vibes of the thing. It's just a moment in time that people have already probably in a way like erased from their minds, all the bad parts anyway. I know there were some good bits sprinkled in there, like you did have the Firefly Funhouse thing and the Boneyard match and the Bloodline stuff, the Bayley and Sasha stuff. Like there were little highlights in there because like the people involved were just too damn talented and creative not to produce something like worthwhile and worth watching. Like obviously I get that, but if the trade-off is we lose those things, and like I know this could be really controversial, we lose the Bloodline, I think the Bloodline still would have found its way at some point in the future because it just felt like we were going there at some point. If we lose all those things in the exact way they happened, but then we also don't get like the Triple H celebration stuff and just all the black goo and retribution and all that stuff, if that's the trade-off, I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to erase all of it if it just means that we get rid of just all the bad and just the soul-destroying stuff and energy and feelings that come every time I think of the Thunderdome era. So for me, delete it, do a full Matt Hardy and delete that era.
So I've gone for a very selfish one here. I've not got one for one that like was something that destructive booking or whatever, although obviously it was. I've not gone because it insulted me or anything like that. There's plenty of examples that are a bit more personal than that in terms of my fandom. But in terms of as a content creator, I really wish the Montreal Screw Job would fuck off and die. I hate it. I hate talking about it. I think from the moment you start becoming a wrestling fan, it's like one of these legendary pieces of lore that you hear about and you're like, Screwjob, what you mean the result was actually real and you left and all this stuff. And it's very, very interesting as you're going through your wrestling fan journey, and obviously over the decades people have really litigated it 1,000 million times. We've heard everyone's perspective, who screwed who, I don't give a hoot. The problem is that when you're in this line of work, and it's a wonderful line of work that we are very privileged to be able to do, there's no such thing as a bad day here in the same way there is if you work like an admin job in an office, and I've done those. You end up having to talk about in excruciating detail the Montreal Screw Job inevitably over and over and over and over and over again until you know it better than your own family members. And just like some people might have with their family, they get sick of it in the end, and here we are. I never want to say those words again, but I know I'm going to have to a couple of weeks from now when it pops up on the list I'm narrating. I would just like to scrub it from my head entirely. The moment Bret Hart came back to WWE, was it 2010?
Yeah, 2010.
Yes. 2010, that should have been the end of it. No more Montreal Screwjob BS. And yeah, here we are. Look, it would be disingenuous of me as well to not acknowledge that we've made a lot of money off the Montreal Screwjob over the years as well. But I'm just really sick of talking about it, and I wish it would go away.
Dave covered it at the time perfectly well.
Yeah, so it's done. Apart from Earl Hebner's Twitter accounts of what happened, everything else can go away.
So if I was going to delete any moment from wrestling history, I mean, it would be the K-Vic stuff with Kane and Triple H. And I shouldn't bring it up because now I have to explain it, because if you're a brand new viewer, there is no need for you to know this. I will be the person to ruin your days. But in 2002, when WWE was desperately trying to figure out how do we stop these ratings going the wrong direction, even though it was just life, we peaked as far as we could peak, so now we have to go in the other direction. But they decided we should push the envelope even further. So Triple H comes out and essentially accuses Kane of being... It went in like stages, so I think I'd probably get this wrong. But week one was Kane was a drunk driver. Week two was he drove his girlfriend home from a party and then he was drunk and she died in the car. and then he had sex with her. Well, it's kind of weird because originally they just made out like they'd had sex and the police had found semen. This is what they, not my words, all right? I apologise to my parents, could be watching this. But yeah, originally the police had found semen in Katie Vick's body. But then Triple H said he did that after the fact. But I don't actually think it was ever made clear if he did do that or they'd had sex at the party and then obviously they would have found it anyway. But then we went to a real funeral parlour, by the way, again talking about behind the curtain stuff here. The Triple H, what do you call it, skit, when he humped a mannequin in a casket. It was a real funeral parlour, and in the room next door was a real funeral, and I think they had to go next door and tell these idiots to shut up. So what the hell we were thinking, I don't know. But it is trash television. At the time, it made me never want to watch any kind of pro wrestling again. And even though it's now 22 years old, whatever it may be, it still blows my mind that anybody would have thought a necrophilia angle would have been the way to get people invested. And also, even if it did, are these the fans you want? I'm going to go out on a limb here. We're going to bring the business side into things. I would imagine if you're well into necrophilia, you're probably not spending a lot of money on wrestling merchandise or whatever the advertisers want to advertise to you. You're probably more into like spades and dirt, and concrete and gravel, and things like that, and probably disguises and a torch when you go graveyards late at night. This is the worst thing I've ever said. I regret it now. Just gonna look around the room, kind of panicking because we've gone down an alley we can't turn around from. But yeah, it was just dreadful. Really, really, really bad. Not funny, not goofy wrestling for life, just trash television. Just gotta tell it like it is.
I would delete from wrestling history Triple H's first day in the business. I'm not as big a fan as some people might know, but it goes beyond, it would save me a lot of incredibly tedious and long and silent professional wrestling matches. I want to know what WWE looks like without his influence, because it's seismic, transformative. It no longer exists in the way that it does now without him even entering it. I think it's one of the most fascinating what-if scenarios, and that's not just because when he sort of wormed his way into power, and a lot of former writers, a lot of former agents, a lot of former wrestlers have all said that he wormed his way into power and abused it, hence the artistic atrocity that was Monday Night Raw from about 2002 onwards. I think artistically it looks incredibly different. I think a lot of careers might have actually flourished without him trying to sort of push everyone down. NXT was fine, but PWG was better. I wonder what an alternative would look like. It's just fascinating. I know this is very indirect, would AEW exist without Paul Levesque and NXT being proof of concept that something in a major arena scale with that level of professional wrestling, quite frankly, before All In could actually work in the United States? So there's positives and negatives to it, but I just think that the early 2000s set in a rot artistically that took so long to recover, and I blame almost everything on him personally. I think he was incredibly tedious, incredibly self-serving, and what if he just never decided to become a wrestler? What if, he just wanted to do something else? It would look drastically different, and honestly, everything's worked out, right? WWE fans are happy, AEW fans are happy. I don't even know why they still talk to each other, quite frankly. Everything's really worked out. A lot of terrible years happened, and it's his fault.
Oh my god, where to start with wrestling moments to be deleted forever? There are so many good ones, I guess bad ones. Actually, a lot of them came from a similar time period. So when I traced all of those back to their origin point, I would have to go with WWE signing the Saudi Arabia deal, politics aside, and wrestlers being grounded at an airport or whatever that was aside. Just a number of terrible things at the first couple years of Saudi shows. They've gotten better, but the first few years were absolutely dreadful as the negative flip version of WrestleMania, where it's like, we got to bring these guys back and they're going to be terrible every time, because the people that I associate with the likes of Crown Jewel and so on are Goldberg's WWE final terrible run where he nearly killed himself and The Undertaker. We also had the worst match of all time, maybe, between Undertaker and Kane and DX, which is just, you could have Shawn Michaels returning to the ring on here as a separate thing, definitely. There was also Braun Strowman getting buried, Brock Lesnar's terrible matches on these cards, generally speaking, as well. Crown Jewel 2019 was Cain Velasquez and Tyson Fury wrestling on the same card. It was all terrible. There's just so many awful things. Shane McMahon winning the Best in the World trophy as well. So many terrible booking decisions, so many terrible matches, and so many terrible appearances. And just scrap the whole lot. Just scrap it all. Just get rid of it, please. Just please.
It involves Earl Hebner and a questionable refereeing decision, but it is not Montreal. No, it is not the Montreal Screw Job. I believe that has been covered elsewhere in this video, though. But for me, I'm going to choose to, because when you look back through wrestling, there's been so many dark days and tragedies and horrible events that have happened. And yes, you'd like to stop those from happening. But I'm going to take a slightly lighter approach here and just go with like a what-if scenario. I'm going to go back to April the 17th, 2000 at Bryce Jordan Center, State College, Pennsylvania, for an edition of Monday Night Raw. Yes, this is the Raw where famously, after goading Triple H into a world title match, Chris Jericho beat him with a slightly fast count from Earl Hebner. There was the APA were there to kind of back up Jericho. Stephanie McMahon was losing her mind. Triple H lost his mind afterwards. Just some great heel work from the game there. And Jericho, for the first time in his career, was a world champion. Yes, Chris Jericho, WWF champion. And it lasted about 20 minutes. Now, I was a big Jericho-holic back then. Y2J was just white hot. He was just starting to find his groove, because obviously there was the hype debut and the arrival and the promo with The Rock. And then Jericho kind of like floundered for a bit, but by this point in time, he was firmly there. Like, there was just on that cusp of being like, you could almost make an argument for the top babyface. Yes, there was The Rock. Obviously, Austin was out injured at that point in time. But The Rock was the guy, and Jericho was like nipping on those heels just underneath him. And for me, it's just like the moment I'm going to remove is Earl Hebner reversing his decision, because Earl Hebner would be pressurized by Triple H, blah, 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 blah. So he'd reverse the decision. Jericho would have to give the title back. He did get to wear it around his waist, and it looked pretty darn good, man. The Big Eagle looked really good. And I'm just kind of, what does that look like with Chris Jericho as a babyface world champion? Because you look back at Jericho's career, all the times he's held a world title, he's been a heel. And just that Y2J character was such a fun, popular babyface. And you're thinking, where could he have gone if he'd have got, it wouldn't have had to have been a long run, but just say, you know, even like 2 months as the world champion. What would the wrestling landscape have looked at that time, with Austin out the way, with Rock as the guy, but Jericho, could he have become the guy as a babyface? Now, he was great as a heel champion. One of my favorite rivalries ever was the revisiting of Shawn Michaels and Jericho when they feuded over the world title. That was just great. Jericho was the best in the world at what he does. Just such a great heel world champion. The suits, the long words, Nick Bockwinkel-esque. It was brilliant. But I just always think, what would happen if Earl Hebner didn't reverse that decision? Where would we be now, here in 2024, looking back at Jericho's career? Would he have been able to become a top babyface, the top babyface? Or would it have floundered? Would it have just been a case of holding on to it till Rock got it back eventually at some point, or Triple H took it off him, or Austin comes back? But yeah, just a fun little light and breezy one to look back on.